It's the 20th of October and it's time for the 20th film in my 31 Horrors of Mike. We're going back further now from 1957 to 1932 to what was at one time considered a lost classic, The Old Dark House. Directed by James Whale of Frankenstein, Invisible Man, and Bride of Frankenstein fame, the Old Dark House is often referred to as the proto haunted house film, although it isn't entirely because there were films before that a lot of people took from when they were developing the haunted house genre. But the Old Dark House definitely had its part to play. It wasn't tremendously successful at the time in America, but it was successful uh, over in Britain, and it's one of these films that it was lost for a long time, but they found a print of it, and it's now become a bit of a classic. I hadn't actually seen it until a couple of years ago, um, and I was really really impressed with it when I watched it. It stars Charles Lawton, Melvyn Douglas, and Boris Karloff, and it's about a bunch of different travellers who are all coincidentally in a remote part of Wales. There's this terrible, terrible storm, and they look for shelter, and all these different people look for shelter in the same place, this old dark house. Now, the house is host to the Femme family who have lived there for some time, and they are accompanied by a butler called Morgan, played by Karloff. And as all the travellers arrive at the old dark house, they then sit round a fire and get to know each other and get to know their hosts. They start to realise that there's something a little bit creepy about their hosts. They seem very strange. They seem to have a strange dynamic between them, and you start to realise that there is another member of the family who is imprisoned somewhere in the house called Saul, who likes to burn things, and also that Morgan, the butler, played by Karloff, becomes a bit of a maniac himself when he has a drink. So eventually, what happens is that the people can't leave the old dark house because the weather is so terrible. I mean, it's like flash floods. It's really dangerous outside, but they don't particularly want to stay either because they're in this really creepy environment. The family that they're talking to seem very very strange, and they know there's a dangerous maniac in the house, and they also know that the butler isn't exactly to be trusted either. Karloff plays the part of Morgan very much like Frankenstein's monster. In fact, in a lot of ways, Karloff is really wasted in this film, but it's really a lot of fun. And the only thing I would say is, if you're looking for a haunted house film, well, I say it's like one of the sort of proto haunted house films. It's like a haunted house film without the haunting. It like developed the idea of the house, the remote house in the dark, being battered by wind, strangers meeting there, people getting lost, all the sort of things that you've seen in haunted house films since. But there isn't actually really a supernatural element to the House. I hope I'm not ruining anything for anyone that hasn't seen it. But really, what the enjoyment comes from is the way the different characters interact with one another. Charles Lawton, who's just a phenomenal actor, is just incredibly good in this film. And just the dynamic between all the characters sitting there, it's kind of fun, it's kind of a little bit creepy, but it's fun. They're all round this fire in the one room, and they're all getting to know one another and talk, and it feels, again, it's a little bit like cozy horror. Some people may not even classify this as a horror film. I certainly do. I think it's got the conventions and the tone and the atmosphere of a horror film. It may not entirely have the content of a horror film in places, but I think we can forgive it for that because it's a really uh, great atmospheric film, that's funny and creepy at the same time. And I really would recommend this on a winter's night. Watch this a dark winter's night if there's a storm outside. If you've got a copy of the old Dark House, put it on. In fact, even maybe on Halloween if you're into older films. So that's the old Dark House. It has aged, obviously, 1932. you know, the early years of putting sound into motion pictures, but it's fantastic. I love it, you know, and it's a Universal picture. It's one of the Universal films that often gets forgotten about, but it's gathering momentum now. It's getting more of uh, a following now, and deservedly so. And James Whale's just a fantastic director. So 1932, The Old Dark House. Check that out. That's the 20th of my 31 Horrors of Mike. I'll be back tomorrow with the 21st. 21 comes after 20, doesn't it? Pretty sure it does. The 21st film in my 31 Horrors of Mike. And I would also like to really thank everybody for the really kind birthday wishes for the channel after that rather impromptu video I put up last night. But thanks anyway, and I'll see you all tomorrow. You all rock, etc.